I'm Doug Rogers. It's October 16th.
And I'm Russell Rogers. We're the Rogers team from Keller Williams Southlake. We're your DFW housing pros. Let's talk DFW real estate. Doug, I think you've got some good data for us today on how things might be looking a little different.
Yeah, as George Orwell said, all markets are created equal, except some are more equal than others. Recently had two listings. Both of them are 589. Both of them went on the market within 2 weeks of each other. One listing was on the edge of town, out toward the Alliance Corridor, just a little off of I-35, and the other was in the dead center of town, Las Colinas. If you drew a dart right in the middle, it's dead center of DFW. One on the edge of town, beautiful home, well manicured yard, everything about it's impeccable, and it's not moving quickly. The one in the dead center of town had 10 offers and sold considerably above list price in one weekend. So I've got to thinking, I've got to check this out. I don't understand what's happening. If I made a mistake, have I mispriced things? Did I price one too low and one too high? So I went back and created some interesting perspective for you. So I looked at it from a pre-COVID perspective. What was happening pre-COVID in the third quarter of the year? And in what we call the Alliance Corridor that we've been using as a statistical marketplace, originally that marketplace in pre-COVID was selling for about 260 on average. Then the following quarter in 2020, it was down to 275, up to 275. Third year, 2021, 350. 2022, 408. And this year, it's down to 377, the same house. It's on the market longer, and it's dropping in price, and even the number of units are selling less. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to compare it to the same number of type homes selling in Grapevine, Colleyville, Coppell, South Louisville, Las Colinas, and part of HEB, keeping it all north of 183. And so that average was 363 2019, 400 in 2021, 452, 2022, third quarter, 508, up considerably. Keep that in mind. That's up considerably over the year over year. And in 2023, it's up again. It didn't go down. In the Alliance Corridor, we went down a good $30,000 on average. And in the center of town, the area that if you can kind of create a horseshoe above DFW Airport and just circle the cities all around there from Las Colinas, Coppell, South Louisville, Grapevine, Colleyville, and HEB, it's up another $50,000. So one marketplace hit the ceiling and pulled back $30,000, and the other marketplace crashed through the ceiling and went up another $50,000. So not all markets are actually equal. If you're in the center of town, things are still selling pretty well. The actual days on the market are still 25 days. Now, Russell, I think you've done some shopping around and looking at days on market.
Yeah, so I think we're looking more like we did in 2019 or pre-COVID, basically. I just ran a few numbers for three of the markets we talk about. So for Alliance, and just kind of pulling an average house, 3.2 with a certain dollar amount per market, kind of matching what they would do. For Alliance right now, it had 109 listings that kind of matched my little search. 33% of those were over 60 and 14% were over 90. And then you go to Grapevine, Colleyville, Keller, and Southlake, 30% are over 60 and 16% are over 90. And even in Plano and Frisco, which we would imagine to be kind of a hotbed of activity, it still had 33% over 60 and 16% over 90. So generally we have about 15% over 90 days with 30% over 60. So, it's really kind of changed. We were talking before we started, during the COVID mania, if you did a search for over 30 days, you basically never found anything. And even up through last year, through kind of the summertime, it was the same. If you did a search for a client and then said, well, what's been sitting a while? You did over 30 days, like you would have zero populate. Where now it's 33% of those listings matching that criteria, basically coming up as over 60, and then even half of those over 90. So really kind of showing there's something going on here, and we're kind of looking more toward what we were looking like in 2019 or even beforehand, and maybe there's some weakness going on here.
Yeah, well, there's two questions we can ask right now. If you're the buyer and you're looking at a house that's been on the market 60 days, what's the first thing you do?
Oh, I go look at it.
Well, after you know, but I'm looking at the history of the house. How many price reductions have we had? Did we have a price reduction in the first 2 weeks? Did we have a price reduction in 30 days, 45 days, 30 days? Have we been stepping it down? Because that actually will tell you two different things. If they're starting to step it down, they've got to sell. They have to move. If it's been stepped down every week for 4 or 5 weeks in a row, they have to move. There's something going on where they're being transferred or something. They really, really have to move. So that might impact the offer we write. But on the flip side, we were counseling the sellers at the same time if we need to reduce the price. And oftentimes I kind of walk a fine line between I want to know how many showings I've had before I have a price reduction. And if I had numerous showings and there's no red flags in this house, the flooring looks good, the paint is good, the yard is nice, it doesn't back up to the highway or everything about it's nice, then the only thing left is the price.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that points to even some of the economics in these areas, the outlying areas we're talking about, because I have that one listing on the east side of town, and the activity has been much less for this house that is priced correctly and is, you know, very beautiful and doesn't have any of those issues. I think it's purely the location. And so, yeah, to your point, there's a lot that goes on here. And once you kind of cure all those items, the only thing that left is the price, to your point. And even if you've looked at comps, those 6 month, 3 month comps with this accelerating interest rates and some seasonality kind of going into it, maybe the price has to come down because, even though at the time we thought it was all correct and the comps were correct, the environment might have changed.
Well, that brings up a good question. What are the rates doing right now? And the question I want to ask is, what is the tipping point as to when the rates come down enough that it changes the direction of the marketplace?
Yeah, so let's go through the numbers, and I'm going to give you the full list this time. So for the 30-year fixed, we have gone up. Again, these are all averages from Mortgage News Daily. The 30-year fix is at 7.8, so kind of the highest we've talked about. I think it hit that last week at one point, but then went back down by the time we had the show. 15-year fix is 7.1, and after talking to Craig, that may not be all that accurate, or the 15 years are actually hovering around the 30-year rates because of some banking financial issues. The 30-year jumbo is at 7.9. The 5/1 arms at 7.16. Again, that may be faulty. The 30-year FHA is at 7.22, and then the 30-year VA is at 7.24. So again, those are averages, but we're really into the sevens now. This isn't like 6.95 or maybe we're peaking above 7. We're fully into the sevens, and for those conventional buyers, we're at 7.8, which is the highest we've talked about so far. And then to your point about the tipping point, I think 7 was the number. We can't tell for sure. These opinions are my own, but we even talked about on the show. When we first kind of crossed 7, when we first started filming these, is that was that going to change the mentality of the buyers? And I think it has, and I think it's harder to stomach a 7 point anything than it is even a high 6. I feel like 6 was close enough where, sometimes we had 5, so it almost seemed like only a 1% difference. Almost like Walmart pricing, right? If they sell it to you at $19.95, you feel like you bought it for $19. I have to get on to Nori about this all the time because she'll tell me $19. I'm like, no, it was like $19.95. That's $20. But, that $6.95 felt like 6, where, 7.8 really does feel like 7.
Well, there's two things that happened to me earlier in the year. I sold a 1.3 and I sold a $700,000 house. And in both cases, the $700,000 house was a VA buyer, and they asked us to pay $20-something thousand towards their closing cost so they could buy the rate down. And the same thing happened on the 1.3. They asked for closing cost, and they bought the rate down. And right now, you can't come up with enough money to buy the rate down from 7.8 down to 6.8. But if you were at 7 or 7.05, you can buy the rate down to a 6, and if it's 6 something, and if you've got the rate set at maybe 7 or 6.78, 2 or 3 discount points will get you almost a 6.5. But we just can't reach that right now.
Yeah, and even after the recent activity with bonds going up, I mean, even today it was not 7.8 when we started today, over the weekend, but bonds just continue to kind of move higher, and so do rates. And we'll see what the Fed says, but I think they're achieving their goal. Again, this opinion is my own, and it's all kind of conjecture because there's too many variables to really know. Seasonality, different economic factors. Obviously, there's several wars going on, but if the Fed's intent was to damage the housing market pricing, which they did admit to that in, literally in speeches, I think they're starting to achieve their goal.
Well, I guarantee you they're achieving their goal. There's 2 or 3 places you can see it. Go look at the stock of Walmart and compare it to Home Depot and Lowe's. Home Depot and Lowe's are struggling because no one's buying houses. And if you're not buying houses, no one's buying garden hose, lawnmowers, washer and dryers, and things that go in a house. But the next thing I think we can start watching, and this is what we can actually guide you on, is the actual listing inventory is starting to creep up a little bit as we go along. Week over week in Grapevine, Keller, Colleyville, Southlake, listings are at 38 new. Active option, we had 17, which is quite a bit fewer than we had the week before. Before that's actually had 32 go out under contract. In the past week, we only had 17. And so the number of listings went up by 23. So there's 343 active listings in Grapevine, Colleyville, Keller, Southlake. Now you compare that to the Flower Mound, Capel, Highland Village marketplace over the last 7 days. They added a couple. There's 22 new listings. Same number went under contract, 17. But the total number of listings is still 10 units higher at 218. In the Alliance Corridor, added 44 listings. That's 2 more than we usually add, or the week before. Active option, fewer, 28. And the listing inventory is up by 3. That's 393. Frisco Plano, we added 77 new listings. That's 5 higher than the week before. Under contract, 56. That's 6 less than the week before. But here's the number that's kind of sneaking up in the Frisco Plano area. They are currently at 688 active listings. That's 39 more than they were the week before. So maybe our goal, or maybe it's going to be good for us to start seeing the listing inventory get a little heavier, get a little more, just slow down just a little bit, and prices start to drop. And if prices start to drop, maybe that will create more activity for the buyer side.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway there is the absorption slowed down, because we are expecting more listings to come about after the lull that we've talked about several times on the show here. But the absorption seemed to indicate a tick down here. So we'll see if that's an ongoing trend or just a week over week kind of a thing. We don't know. But it is interesting because it was a lot of absorption even as we were going the last several weeks. And now maybe it's going the other direction. So I guess we'll see.
I think so.
And I have some anecdotal stuff too. I actually had 2 buyers last week who were kind of gung-ho, even knowing 7% was going to be where they're at. But once they started to really look at the inventory and the houses themselves, they just no longer thought that paying the new price, the high price of the house currently listed, and that higher interest rate, when combined, making their kind of total affordability, they really didn't want to buy it. It just was no longer their desire. So they've actually both backed out within the last week because they saw what their options were and they didn't like them.
That's understandable. If the rate is up, the prices are up, and the number of choices are down, that's not a great combination for a buyer until the marketplace starts to fill back up and we start getting more listings and more listings.
Yeah. So either the price comes down or the listings get better, right?
Yeah.
Or the rates get better.
I think we're going to have both.
Yeah. So I guess we'll have to keep watching how prices are affected by rates and, buyers maybe losing desire to buy and how listings coming on the market. And of course, you got to keep tuning into us because we're the only ones in town giving you this information. But Doug, do you have any final thoughts?
I think what we're going to really focus on is the listing inventory as it grows. And if it stays on the market a little longer, we'll have a little more information for you. But stay tuned. We'll be back.
Yeah. So we'll talk to y'all soon. And thanks for watching.